Good morning, SACNAS. How are you? All right. This is not my Halloween costume, okay? So it was actually, number 3 was false because I'll get to it, but I have been traveled outside of the country for personal and professional due to the military. And so I did play football, women's pro football. I was a linebacker, and I was a drill sergeant in the military, so I can keep you all in line. You don't scare me. But hi, Skitno. I'm Dr. Naomi Lee. I'm owner at the Waka or Seneca. I'm here today to talk to you about fashion. Just kidding. I'll get to my outfit in a minute. I'm thrilled to look out and see in this audience all the young, aspiring STEM professionals, and there's so many new ones I heard earlier. So I remember the first time I came to a conference like this. I was a first-gen student at Rochester Institute of Technology, only a couple hours home from home on the res, but there at RIT, I was actually the outsider. Oops. At RIT, I met my first native PhD and faculty member, anthropologist Dr. Jason Yonker. He took me and a few other native students to the American Indian Science and Engineering Society conference, which was earlier this month. I don't know if any of you were also there as well. But I walked into the conference and I thought, what? There are other natives in STEM? Right? For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by other indigenous students in STEM, probably a similar feeling that all of you are having here. Right? That community and Dr. Yonker's mentorship over the years became the cornerstone of my career as an indigenous woman in chemistry. It had been a difficult road, but mentors, both good and bad, have been pivotal to my career. They've also taught me ways to be a better mentor for my students, to ensure they belong in STEM. Right? So today I'm going to talk about identity and why embracing one's identity, even if all your identities don't seem to fit together, like my outfit, all right? Now you may think I didn't look in the mirror today, but I chose this intentionally. Maybe you saw me earlier in my other clothing. You might not recognize me then. But I want to talk about all of the different identities, right? And so my shirt represents my heritage. I grew up on the Seneca Cattaraugus Reservation in upstate New York. Go Bills! Yes! Okay. Hey, I know who that came from. That has always been a big part of my identity, right, growing up on the reservation. But I didn't think about it until I went to college. My classmates and faculty basically looked at me and like, you're different. You're not like us. Where are you from? Even though the reservation was only 2 hours from home, and it was actually on our ancestral lands. I had always excelled in science and math, even though I had little support from my high school teachers. My father never received a college degree, and my mother received a bachelor's degree later in life, so neither could offer much help. I was accepted into all the universities that I applied to, including the big ones like Harvard and Yale. But RIT gave me the best financial aid package. Going to RIT allowed me to stay close to my parents, who were both sick at the time. This was a pivotal choice as Dr. Yonker helped me to find myself as a scientist and an indigenous woman. He encouraged me to go to graduate school, get a PhD, and do research. I had no idea those options were even available to me at the time. So my lab coat represents the next phase, becoming a scientist. Grad school obviously was the next step, but I struggled there. Both of my parents were sick and I had a hard time being away from them. My advisor also was not native and seemed to make little effort to connect to me or support my work. In fact, I was getting myself into trouble. I was partying and drinking, and eventually I got a DUI. So I was very angry and alone. I lost my purpose, I had self-image issues, and the longer it went on, the more I felt those doors that Dr. Yonker had opened for me were starting to close. So I decided to take my master's qualification and exams, then left graduate school. on a leave of absence to go home and care for my parents. And that's actually the one I thought I might join the CIA or the FBI. I didn't know that if I'd ever go back. I just knew that I didn't belong there. So you might find yourself at those points in your education, in your career, and places where you don't seem to fit, where you are the outsider, where no one is telling you that you belong there. We all have mentors who are not a good fit because they have different personalities or different backgrounds. It doesn't mean something is wrong with you or them, but it may mean it's time to take a step back and make a change, right? And so for 2 years, I lived at home, cared for my parents, and worked at a grocery store. I slowly started to find myself again. But both of my parents died of illnesses that result of health disparities in Native communities. And in that, I found the motivation that continues to drive me today, to identify and eliminate those disparities that are killing my community. Thank you. It was also during that time when I joined the military, right? And so my pants represent the next important stage. I was actually just in Hawaii. I'm stationed in Hawaii, so I feel like I should be able to wear this uniform there. But anyway, so in 2009, I joined the Army National Guard as a second lieutenant, right? And initially, thank you, it was so I could pay the bills and maybe do something different with my career, like go to the CIA or FBI. However, in the 2 years I was on a leave of absence from my PhD program, the military helped me gain the discipline I needed to get on the right track. As an Army officer, I learned ways I could influence others. All right, and so that brings me back to my lab coat. I eventually returned to the University of Rochester to honor my parents and finish my PhD. And though I still struggled with my advisor, I found another mentor, Dr. Cliff Poudry, who is in the audience. Right. He was the first Seneca I'd ever met that had a PhD, and obviously, many of you may know, he was one of the founding members of SACNAS. And at the time, he was working at the National Institutes of Health. And so he encouraged me to apply for a postdoc with the federal government. And so learning to embrace my identities was life-changing, but didn't really start until I went to the NIH. So after I had finished my PhD, right? By then I had leadership experience from the military, research experience from my PhD, and I was increasingly comfortable with my identity as an Indigenous woman, right? Just as comfortable as I am in this outfit today. And I realized I had something important to offer. An opportunity to speak for an entire population who had been silenced for centuries. I was asked to sit on meetings with leaders at the highest level while at the NIH, including Sylvia Burwell, the former Secretary of Health and Human Services, and Dr. Anthony Fauci, former Director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. While at NIH, I advocated for the Tribal Health Research Office. I brought Native high school and undergraduate students to NIH for summer research programs. Opening the doors for students led me to a future in academia. I realized that I wanted to influence the next generation. I wanted to change the narrative that I experienced as a student. I wanted to help students get on whatever path they wanted to achieve. I wanted to provide students what I couldn't find, a Native professional in a field that they can look at and say, I can do that. From there, I did a postdoc at the University of New Mexico and participated in the Native Investigator Development Program through the University of Colorado, always with a focus on Indigenous health disparities. While at UNM, I met NAU professor, and now my colleague and friend and mentor, despite being a Steelers fan, Dr. Janie Ingram, who is also one of your board members. At NAU, I found my community of STEM researchers who are focused on the same goals, mentoring students and addressing health disparities. So take another look at my entire ensemble. It represents me as a whole person. My identity as an Indigenous woman has been a strength not just to me, but those directly that I affect, but also to the military and the United States' place in the world.
For example, I was sent to Palau, which if you don't know where that is, oh, I see. Yeah, I know some of them are here. I was sent to Palau to consult for the military. The first time I went to Palau was during COVID-19 as a vaccine expert who works with indigenous populations. I was given instructions to not talk to the federal president of Palau. However, no mention was made of the cultural leader, a woman of equal or in some parts of the community, greater status. The military leadership seemed to not know enough about the Palauan culture and the important role she played in the community. Since I didn't have any specific instructions, I went ahead and talked to her. Indigenous woman to indigenous woman, right? We are both seeking to uplift our communities. Since then, we formed a good working relationship, and she's invited me back on 2 different occasions, including a conference for Indigenous women. Through these connections, we established an MOU signed by both Northern Arizona University and Palau Community College. Currently, we're setting up study abroad programs and research labs, and we're creating a pathway to train Palauan researchers and healthcare providers who will stay and work in their communities, right? Representation doesn't just matter in academia and the military. It matters when you're sick or in labor, right? Everybody deserves culturally competent care. And if we want diverse physicians, we need to start training them closer to home. If we want Indigenous, Black, Hispanic, or LGBTQ plus physicians and other STEM professionals, we must create a pathway starting well before college where students feel safe and supported in these fields, where they have mentors. Notice I say mentors, right? From academia, industry, and many more, where students can excel well past their graduation and into their career. Not only do I still routinely rely on my mentors, but I have become friends with many of my mentors, including the Steelers fan. My job now as a mentor is to take what I learned from good mentors and wished from the not so good mentors. That's not to say there's no value in the not so good mentors. When I told my high school chemistry teacher I had been accepted to RIT, his response was that biochemistry was hard and he didn't think I was gonna make it. Look at me now. Right. I saw that as motivation. When people say I can't do things, I'm like, oh yeah, watch this. All right. But I want to be the kind of mentor who creates a safe learning environment. I want you to have mentors who uplift you, give you opportunities, and are your biggest cheerleaders. In my lab, I look for students from historically excluded groups. It started with Indigenous students because of who I am and the work I'm doing. But because it's a safe space for learning and growing for one group, it's become a safe space for many marginalized groups. And it's bigger than my lab. You're not gonna find any other department like NAU's chemistry department in the country, right? We have more women faculty in leadership than almost any other department, chemistry department in the country. I know not all of you are in a place where it's easy to find a mentor. You might have to get creative. When I struggled in high school, it was my art teacher who reached out. My first mentor was an anthropologist. When I went to NIH, I found myself working with other Native PhDs for the first time. Not sure where to start? Look around you right now. Here you're surrounded by people like you, know where you've been, and can help you get to where you want to be. When I started studying science in college, I didn't consider myself a Native woman in STEM. I didn't think I was smart enough or good enough or even Native enough since I'm only half, right? I thought of my identities as separate. I was just a Native woman and I was a scientist. Today, I am embracing all of my identities as one. Indigenous scientist, service member, woman in STEM. Perhaps the best thing this perspective offers me is the ability to see students who are experiencing similar challenges and tell them, you can do it. You are enough, you belong, and you can be successful, and I can help you. All of you in this room turn around
and help others as part of your journey. We will create pathways for diverse STEM professionals who bring their talents, skills, and curiosities to solve the world's problems. As a proud Native woman in STEM and the military, I will be your cheerleader, champion, mentor, whatever you need as you embrace your identities and become the scientists who will change the world, not only for yourselves, but those who come after you. Nyaweh.